I must admit, I didn't expect this turn of events. My car wasn't in the best condition. It needed servicing, and I didn't have the money for it. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten behind the wheel, but I had no choice. I closed the door, and as I got out of the car, I noticed the stares of those around me. My BMW didn't fit in this neighborhood. I headed for the state secretary's office. When I entered the office, probably judging by my clothes, the security guard pointed me to the line for driver's license. Renewals. I shook my head, and he looked at me in confusion. Do you need a new photo? He asked. I shook my head no. Why are you here? He asked. Almost everyone in the crowded office turned to listen. Most of them didn't even bother to pretend they weren't interested. I'm here to register for welfare, I replied quietly. You know, welfare? I have no income and no money, and I'm going to starve to death, social worker? Or is it welfare that they just came and threw me and all my stuff out of the shitty apartment I moved into after I got kicked out of the house where I thought I was going to live the rest of my life? Or is it welfare that I can't find a damn job to save my ass because no one will hire me? Calm down, lady, he said in a nervous voice. Half the people in this office are registering or dealing with social services. I know what you need. Go in there and grab one of those forms. Fill it out completely and drop it in the box at the front desk. Then sit down and they'll call you. How long will they call? I asked. Not long, he replied. No more than 2 or 3 hours. He wasn't kidding. People were sleeping while waiting for the call. There was a magazine rack in the corner, but it was empty. I got the impression that most of the magazines weren't returned when the people who read them were finished. Everyone present was looking at me. I knew they were wondering what the hell a person dressed like me was doing there. It's a long and rather amusing story. It all started exactly 2 years after the following Tuesday. My name is Melinda Conrad. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking my name sounds a lot like Mel Conrad, the guy who got rich last year and is giving all his money to charity and stuff. Yes, you're right. He's my husband. Well, technically he's my ex-husband. And you know what else? I made a bad deal. I am directly responsible for this man becoming filthy rich and me having nothing to show for it. Okay, maybe I'm not directly responsible, but if I hadn't made him divorce me, he wouldn't be rich. So I deserve some credit, right? 2 years ago, we were happier than ever. We weren't rich. We were a typical, ordinary, middle-class family. My husband, Melvin Conrad, my daughter, Melissa Conrad, and I were like 3 peas in a pod. We were a very close-knit family. We had a great house, and I was kicked out of it. Then I had to move into this crappy apartment that I just got evicted from. But anyway, let's continue. The 3 of us loved each other as if there were no tomorrow. My husband wasn't very interesting, but he was nice enough and loved me. He worked very hard to provide for our family, and as I said, we lived comfortably. Our daughter was just finishing her freshman year at a state university when it happened. These days, there are so many names for the same thing, but you know what I had? Some call it a midlife crisis. Others call it a hormonal imbalance, and still others call it empty nest syndrome. These are all nice names for a spoiled woman who is bored, doing stupid things, and usually regretting it. Sometimes it applies to men too, so you guys shouldn't feel superior or immune to it. If you see a balding 40-year-old man driving a damn sports car with a 20-year-old blonde next to him, chances are he's suffering from this disease. Anyway, I invited my husband to dinner because I needed to tell him something. I had done something terrible and needed to clear the air. I looked pretty good, to say the least. At 40, I could still wrinkle my nose on a good day. I had gained a little weight since we met, but it wasn't a big deal. Mel loved me so much, and I was such a fool. He showed up a little late, no more than 5 minutes, and I didn't scold him for it. He smiled at me. His face still lit up like a Christmas tree every time he saw me. You would have thought we hadn't seen each other for weeks, but in fact it had only been a few hours. I was very nervous when he hugged me and held me close. Butterflies fluttered in my stomach. Something told me I was doing BFM. He sat down opposite me. His face expressed absolute joy. I was sure he thought it was a good sign. I didn't want to leave the man I had lived with, loved, and raised a daughter with for over 20 years, but I had no choice. It was either him or my happiness. "How was your day, honey?" he asked. Damn it, he was the one who had been working all day. What did he think I'd been doing all day? Did he really think I was working on a cure for cancer or trying to solve the Middle East crisis? I woke up at 9 and loaded the dishwasher. I threw the laundry in the washing machine and half the day was already gone. "Mel, I want a divorce," I told him. He spat the water he had just drunk right in my face. I'm sure it was an accident, but it ruined my makeup and my hair. I sat there with water and saliva running down my face while he tried to catch his breath. Are you serious? He asked quietly. Very, I replied, trying to maintain my dignity, considering that I looked like a raccoon and my waterproof mascara had proven that it was not waterproof. He stood up, wiped his mouth, and said, "My lawyer will be in touch with you." The pain and suffering on his face simply stunned me. I felt like the lowest creature on earth. Everything in me, every cell in my body told me to get down on my knees and say it was just a joke. But I didn't move. He turned to leave, throwing a few bills on the table. "Wait, Mel," I said. "This isn't how it was supposed to happen. Don't you want to talk about it and ask me some questions? Don't we need to discuss how the divorce is going to work?" He turned to me, looked at me curiously, and asked, "Why?" I was in shock. I had gone over this in my head hundreds of times, and not once had he reacted like this. He didn't get angry or cry. He didn't demand an explanation or threaten me. He just accepted what I said and left. What good will that do? Will I feel better? Will you treat me differently? I doubt it. I'm almost certain that if you're doing this, it means you've found someone else and want to be with him. My feelings for you clearly weren't strong enough to change your mind, although that wouldn't have mattered. If you're acting like this, it means you've already slept with him, right? I nodded and said, "But," he interrupted me. "That means you're not interested in me anymore," he said coldly. "Okay, do you have any questions? Do I need to take a DNA test, or is Melissa mine?" "God, Mel," I said. "For God's sake, of course she's yours. What do you take me for?" "You wouldn't like the answer to that question," he said. "Goodbye, Melinda." Then he turned and walked away. He didn't seem as angry or upset as I thought he would be. "Damn it, Mel," I called after him. "Aren't you even going to try to fight for me?" My voice echoed throughout the restaurant. He turned back and, standing 3 tables away, answered me. "Why, Melinda?" he asked. "I can't change your feelings. Who am I to tell you that your feelings are wrong? Obviously, you don't love me the way I love you. If I did, it wouldn't work out. Since you don't love me anymore, I have to forget you and move on. Besides, I only fight for what I want, and after what you said today, I don't want you anymore. I wish you a happy life. I'm not going to stand in your way." Everyone in the restaurant stared at me as Mel headed for the exit. A chill ran through my body. I had read about this feeling. They say it happens when you walk past the place where you will be buried. I guess it means that, as I said, I acted on the BFM principle. My heart and mind were screaming at me, but I couldn't listen to them. I called the waiter and asked where the ladies' room was. When I got home that evening, I realized my husband had left from the empty drawers and closet. All chances of things working out were gone. I had a terrible headache. I grabbed my cell phone and called Greg. He would calm me down. "Yes," he answered. "It's me," I said. "I told him." "Cool," he replied. "How did he react? Did he yell? Beg you to stay? Hit you?" "No," I replied. "He just got up and left. He was very calm. Considering the circumstances, he took it very well." "Do you want me to come over and beat some sense into you?" he asked. "No," I replied. "I just ended a 20-year relationship with a man who worshipped me. I need to be alone." "Okay, see you later," he said, and hung up. I think that was the moment I realized I had underestimated my ex-husband. I knew all the reasons I wanted a divorce. Greg was younger, much younger, and he made me feel alive. At 29, Greg was 11 years younger than me and 9 years older than my daughter. He was wild and uninhibited. He was everything Mel wasn't. I sat down on the edge of our huge double bed. When I looked at the bed, it had never seemed so big and so empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and wondered what new direction my life would take from now on. Sometime around midnight, tossing and turning, unable to sleep, I took out one of our old photo albums and flipped through some memories of Mel and me over the past 22 years. The next morning was even worse. I woke up and wondered why it bothered me so much. I sat at the table and just watched my cup of my favorite coffee cool to room temperature. I don't know why I didn't move, but I had no reason to do anything. I mentally replayed yesterday's conversation with Mel and the conversation with Greg. At the beginning of the evening, Mel looked at me like the sun was shining out of my ass. By the end of the evening, he looked at me completely differently. He looked at me the way you look at a problem or a project at work. as if I were just another problem that needed to be solved in order to end the day. And Greg ruined it. He should have just offered to come over and give me a hug or spend some time with me. When someone is going through an emotional loss, they need to know that someone cares about them. I knew Greg was young, so I didn't judge him. Preparing him to become the person I saw him becoming was an important part of my inspiration. I knew I had caused Mel a lot of pain, and that made me feel terrible, but I was sure that he would be okay in the end. Who was I kidding? I knew he would be miserable without me, but at that moment I was only thinking about my own feelings. My term of service was coming to an end. Damn it, I gave this man the best years of my life. We did our part in continuing the family line. We raised a child. Our duty to society was fulfilled. It was time to have some fun. I wanted to be happy, but I didn't want to wait for my golden years. Why not be happy while I was still young enough to understand what happiness was? The morning after she'd told me, I woke up in a hotel room. At first, I didn't know where I was. The room was dark and the sheets smelled different. They smelled like antiseptic and medicine, so they were probably pretty clean. They didn't have that smell you get after a few weeks of washing with store-bought soap, or traces of liquids, farts, tears, and spilled food that someone had tried to wash out. In other words, they didn't smell like love. I sat down on the bed and remembered where I was and why I was there before I did something stupid and reached for her. My mind remembered that she wasn't there, but my body and heart still missed her. EGBDF, I said to myself and prepared myself for what I had to do. I had a lot to do before I could allow myself to sink into the depression that I knew was just around the corner. I thought about giving up and just staying here to suffer. But eventually, I would have to go outside, and today was as good a day as any to do it. Before turning on the light and throwing off the blanket I had covered myself with so I wouldn't see the tears, I made a to-do list for the day. I needed to call my lawyer. The one I usually dealt with didn't handle divorce and family law. Maybe he could recommend someone. I needed to find more permanent housing. I was probably leaning toward giving the house to Melinda or selling it. Whatever was best for me, I didn't feel it was necessary to make decisions based on Melinda's needs or convenience. I needed to call my daughter so she could always reach me. I wasn't going to make her choose between me and a whore, but I also wanted her to know that I still wanted to be a part of her life as much as she would allow me to be. I needed to separate my finances from Melinda's. Let the judge and lawyers figure it out, but I wasn't going to give her a penny more than I owed her. At the same time, I had to make sure that all my assets remained mine. We also had some social obligations that I had to tactfully inquire about. I wasn't going to become a recluse, but I didn't want to date anyone or try to be a parody of myself, pretending that everything was fine when the pieces of my broken heart were telling me it wasn't. With these thoughts in mind, I called my father-in-law to talk about the barbecue we were supposed to go to for their anniversary. "Hey, Bob," I said when he picked up. "Mel, how's it going?" he asked. "You're still bringing the Dos Equis, right?" "Bob, I was just about to talk to you about that," I said. "I really want to congratulate you and Jean on your anniversary. I wish I had a marriage like yours when I'm your age. But I can't make it on Saturday, so I was hoping you'd let me invite you over for dinner on Friday night." "Stuck at work?" he asked. "I remember those days. Don't worry about it, Mel. So, are we going on a double date? I haven't been on one of those in a while. Sounds fun. Maybe you'll let me dance with your wife. I've always liked young women." "Bob, it'll just be the two of us. I'm not seeing anyone right now. But if you feel uncomfortable, just let me know and I'll send you a gift or something," I said. "Mel, what the hell is going on?" he asked. "You've been talking weird since you called." "Bob, your daughter asked me out to dinner last night," I said. "When we were there, she told me she wanted a divorce. She found someone else and wants to be with him." "What?" he exclaimed. "What did she do? There must be something else going on. Did you do something to her? Are you cheating on her?" "No, sir," I said quietly. "Mel, I'll call you back later. I need to—" he began. "Please, Bob, I don't want to make a scene. I'm sure she'll tell you everything when she's ready," I said. "I don't want to cause any problems or distract from the celebration. We should be celebrating your 45 years of marriage. We should honor those who have gone through it all, not worry about those who haven't been so lucky. I'll call you next week and we'll talk. I just don't want you or Jean to think that I don't appreciate what you've built." 1 minus 1 minus 1 minus 1 minus 1 minus 1, I thought, as I dialed my daughter Melissa's number. Fortunately for me, she wasn't near her cell phone. I could have called her cell, but I didn't really want to talk to her. I just left my number and told her that from now on she could reach me there or at work. One more call and I was referred to a divorce lawyer. The woman on the phone sounded angry but agreed to meet with me later that morning. I took out my laptop and started looking at apartments. Most of them were the same, except for the prices. For some reason, I didn't see the point in buying an apartment in a building that would never be mine. I think I'll want to buy another house eventually, so renting was fine with me. Hell, maybe I'll even buy Melinda out of our house. I quickly took a shower and put on my usual business attire. I'm not a big fan of ties, but a sweater and a sports jacket suited me. I decided to get a gym membership as well. After all, I had to get myself in shape if I wanted another woman to be interested in me enough to take a chance on me. I stepped outside and smiled for the first time since Melinda had walked past me yesterday. There was a woman with a little boy in the hotel parking lot. She was struggling to pull him away from my Mustang. There used to be 3 things that made me smile every time I saw them. The first was my wife, Melinda. The second was my daughter, Melissa. And the last was my 2009 Mustang GT. Every time I look at that car, I smile and shake my head. It takes me back to my childhood when I used to race my Hot Wheels cars across the living room floor. The drive to work was always a pleasure, and today was no exception. It was a chance to take my mind off my problems for a while. I walked into the office, and my assistant Joyce pounced on me like a foxhound on a fox. Melinda has called you twice this morning, she said. She says she can't get through to your cell phone. Joyce, sit down, I said, pointing to the chair behind my desk. She sat down and smiled broadly. Have you finally realized that I'm the reason for your success and decided to reward me accordingly? She asked. Joyce was not only my assistant, but also my friend. We had worked together for so long that it felt like we were family. Joyce, do you remember why I had to leave here in a hurry last night? I asked. She nodded. I bet someone got lucky last night, she said. Well, if anyone got lucky, it wasn't me, I replied. All I got was a punch in the teeth. Melinda said she wants a divorce. Joyce looked at me and realized I couldn't hold back. What a bitch, she said. I bet she didn't expect that turn of events, did she? I shook my head. Joyce stood up and pushed me into a chair. She patted me on the shoulder and tried to express sympathy. If you need anything, let me know, she said. Not unless I ask you to lie. Can't you just tell her the truth? Tell her I'm not answering her calls, I said. Joyce looked at me and nodded. I knew she wanted to ask more. Everyone always wants to know all the details, but she understood that I didn't want to talk about it. She was kind and smart enough not to press the issue. Before lunch, I grabbed the folder containing copies of all my financial documents. I left the office and went to meet with my lawyer. Her office was not at all what I had expected. I thought it would be a large office building, wholly or partly owned by a large law firm. I was wrong on both counts. It was a small, one-story office that was part of a shopping center. On one side of the office was a small medical clinic. On the other side was a Fredericks of Hollywood franchise. Further down the street was a liquor store. All the businesses seemed to be thriving. At first, the difference in the types of businesses seemed strange to me, but then I thought about it. After thinking about it, I realized that one type of business was missing. If you have marital problems, you can come here and buy your wife some lingerie. You can plan a romantic evening and buy something at Fredericks to spice things up. If that doesn't work, you'll have a divorce lawyer at your disposal. You'd find out she cheated on you, go to the clinic to get tested for STDs, and then to the liquor store to drown your sorrows. Shopping at the mall would be quick, easy, and convenient. The only thing missing was a therapist or marriage counselor. Maybe a detective agency and a gun shop would be nice too. I opened the door and went inside. A pleasant older woman asked who I was and what I wanted. Melvin Conrad, I'm here to see Ann Wilson, I replied. I have an appointment for noon. She smiled and invited me to sit down, saying that Miss Wilson would be with me shortly. The woman was at least 60 years old, but she was still stunningly beautiful. I had barely settled into the chair when Ann Wilson opened the door to her office and gestured for me to come in. Ann Wilson was a large woman with long black hair and piercing blue eyes. She looked at me with the same gaze that all predators use to study potential prey. Tell me your story, she said. This statement surprised me. I looked at her in confusion. She just raised one eyebrow and continued to stare at me. Okay, I said. Once upon a time there were 3 little pigs. Very funny, she chuckled. Tell me about your divorce and why it happened, Mr. Conrad. Time is money. I don't want to waste yours or mine, but I'm not likely to take your case. I slumped my shoulders and began to tell her the long story of my marriage to Melinda. When I got to the part about last night's dinner, she gasped and sucked in her breath. Wait, she said sharply. What did she do? She invited us to dinner at her favorite restaurant and said she wanted a divorce because she had found a new man, and that she had already slept with him, I said. Miss Wilson stood up. Have you ever cheated on her? She asked, leaning forward and staring intently at me. Never, ma'am, I replied. What did you do when she told you that? She asked. Ma'am, I couldn't do anything. I left her money for dinner in case she wanted to eat. Then I went home. I packed my things and checked into a hotel, I said. Miss Wilson shook her head. That wasn't the wisest decision. Your leaving will probably allow her to stay in the house temporarily until we come to an agreement. Is the house in your name, her name, or both? She asked, quickly jotting something down in her notebook. In my name, I replied. Melinda doesn't work outside the home. Then why the hell did you leave? She asked, shaking her head. You're worse than all women, for God's sake. She threw her notebook across the room and looked at me. For a moment, I felt like my third-grade teacher trying to make me memorize the multiplication table. That feeling of, damn it, how many times are we going to go over this? As if Miss Wilson expected me to know all the ins and outs of divorce laws and procedures. I stood up, and she turned her head to meet my angry gaze again. Where are you going? She growled. Well, I thought you didn't want to deal with me because I'm doing everything wrong, I said. At that moment, her expression softened, and she pressed a button on her desk. She spoke into an intercom and told her assistant, who was also her aunt, to bring a cart. A magnificent older woman entered the office with a cart full of coffee and fresh donuts. Miss Wilson poured herself a cup and took 2 donuts. I took a cup of black coffee. You didn't do anything wrong, Mr. Conrad, she said. That's why I got so angry. I don't usually represent men in divorce cases because they tend to be in the wrong. The typical scenario is that the man has cheated on his wife many times, usually with a young mistress. When the wife gets tired of it, he tries to rape her in court and leave her penniless and homeless. I've earned a reputation as a lawyer who gets the best terms for my clients in divorce cases. And now many men try to use me to get more favorable terms, even though I don't think they deserve it. Why the hell should they get everything? If they cheat and destroy the marriage, they should pay for it. You've worked your whole life to support this woman. Judging by your address and the fact that your daughter is in college, you've provided her with a good life and a home. Looking at your financial records, I can see that you've been a good provider. And finally, you're not a very good actor, Mr. Conrad. You're trying to act like everything is fine, but I can see that this has devastated you and you're just trying to move on. Hell, you're still too shaken up to be angry. And the pain hasn't even subsided yet. What scares me the most is that you're not even trying to fight her desire. She says she wants a divorce. You didn't even make her file for divorce, you did it because she asked you to. She was the one who cheated on you. And you came home and left the house you built, instead of telling her to leave. She should have moved in with her lover or her parents, if they're still alive. Mr. Conrad, I will definitely take your case. Someone has to defend you, if only to prevent you from giving her everything you have. We spent the rest of the day looking through my financial documents and assessing the value of our property to determine the best course of action. Several times, Miss Wilson looked at me as if I were a fool and asked questions like, so you want to just give her the house for free and pay the mortgage yourself? In other words, you want to pay for her to live there with the guy she's having fun with? Well, probably not, I replied. But inside, her words were already having an effect on me. Why are you giving her almost all your savings? She asked. Well, she needs money to live, I replied. She doesn't have a job. It's just money. I can always make more. I felt like Miss Wilson was about to slap me. She doesn't have a job because she sat on her ass most of her life while you supported her. She has a college degree. She can find a job. She wanted to change her life. Let's give her that chance. I think we should split everything 60-40 in your favor. We'll pay her alimony for 6 months and no more. All other property should be divided equally, including the house, and you will get your 401k retirement account, she said. I left the office in shock. I had no idea it would be this complicated. Mrs. Wilson gave me the name of a good real estate company to list the house for sale. She decided it would be best to put the house up for sale. Usually, a woman was allowed to keep the house until the children reached the age of majority. Our daughter was already living in a dorm, so there was no need to delay the sale. And since I didn't need Melinda's permission to sell the house, the sooner I put it up for sale, the sooner it would all be over. I returned to the office, and as I approached the house, I saw Melinda's car in the parking lot. I saw her get out of the car and drive away. I still wasn't ready to talk to her. When I woke up in the morning, I felt terrible about what had happened between Mel and me. I decided that maybe I just needed to talk to Mel about it. I had to let him know that I didn't mean to hurt him. I just needed to move on. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I called his office, and Joyce said he wasn't there yet. I realized I had been foolish. Mel never came to the office early. He always told me that every minute without me was torture, so there was no point in sitting in the office when he could be with me. I called again after 9 and asked Joyce if he had arrived. Finally, she said he was there but wasn't answering my calls. I found that hard to believe. "Is he really busy, Joyce?" I asked. "No busier than usual," she replied. "Actually, I don't think he's that busy." "Then can I talk to him?" I asked. In all the years Joyce had worked for Mel, I had never heard her act or speak less than politely. I had seen her talk to difficult clients and remain calm until someone else hung up. "Damn it, Melinda," she yelled. "He doesn't want to talk to you. What did you expect? You broke his heart and now you want to talk. If you want my opinion, he's lucky to be rid of you. Don't call here again." Then she hung up. I didn't even think Mel might be upset. He seemed fine last night. But actually, it was good for both of us. The fact that he didn't want to talk to me hurt me. I was about to call Joyce back and remind her that she worked for Mel, not the other way around, and that only he could decide if I could call him, when my phone rang. It was my phone again. I picked it up and heard my mom's voice. "Melinda, what the hell is going on with you?" she asked. "What do you mean, Mom?" I asked. "Your father said there's something going on between you and Mel," she replied. "Do I need to go over there and sort this out?" "You don't need to find out anything, Mom," I said. "Melissa is a grown woman, and I just feel like I need to move on. I'm still young to be doing this. I'm bored, and I need to spread my wings and fly." "Melinda, something else?" "I know exactly what you mean, don't I?" she asked. "Melinda, do you remember my sister, your Aunt Katie?" she asked. I just grunted to let her know I was listening. "When Katie was about your age, she started fooling around with just about everyone. Eventually, her husband found out. He made Katie sleep on a cot in the basement for a year." "Mom, what does that have to do with me?" I asked. "Tell Mel that your father and I will buy you a cot," she said. "Mom, that has nothing to do with it," I replied. "Mel and I will be happier." "That man loves you," she said sharply. "You'll never find anyone who will love you that much. Your father said so." Her voice sounded as if she could barely stand. "How could you do this to a man who has cared for you your whole life?" "Mom, he'll get over it," I said. Then she started muttering something about stupid kids and hung up. I began to realize that everyone was trying to make me look like the bad guy just because I wanted to get out of a bad situation. What was I supposed to do? Sacrifice my happiness on the altar of St. Mel? Screw that idea. I moved on. It was Friday. That evening, I was going on a date with Greg. I was excited because for the first time, I didn't have to hide anything. But I wanted to clear things up with Mel, so I decided to go to his house. The security guards wouldn't let me into the building. I felt Joyce's hand. Just as I was getting into my car, Mel's Mustang pulled into the parking lot. I got out of the car and waved at him. He drove out of the parking lot and drove away. I was so used to him always being happy to see me that I just sat there in shock. I drove home to get ready for my date. I took a shower and used my favorite bath products and perfume. I wanted to drive Greg crazy. I put on a dress that I really liked. It was dark blue, which looked great with my long brown hair and blue eyes. I had had this dress for a long time, but it still fit me well. Maybe not as well as when I was 30, but I never complained. I spent a long time doing my hair and makeup. I wanted Greg to be really proud to have me on his arm. I had to show everyone that he had a reason to be with me and not some 25-year-old beauty queen. I had just finished combing my hair when the door slammed shut. A million thoughts raced through my head. I thought maybe Mel had come back and was angry. I got up from the table and went to see who it was. "Mom, are you crazy?" my daughter Melissa yelled. She ran to the stairs and looked at me like I was insane. "Where's my dad?" The look on her face made it seem like I had killed him. I, I don't know, Lissa," I stammered. "We ended up arguing for a long time about what I was doing. Why the hell did everyone think I was making a mistake? Don't you dare talk to me like that, girl, I yelled at her. I needed to regain control of the situation. I'm your mother, and you need to treat me with respect. If you can't do that, then maybe you shouldn't come to my house and expect me to continue paying for your education. Mom, if you behaved in a way that deserved respect, I would respect you. Right now, I think your hormones are raging and you're ruining your life. If I didn't love you and want the best for you, I would just let you go. On the other hand, this is my house too, and Dad bought it, not you. Dad also pays for my education, not you. Just as I was about to respond, the doorbell rang. She walked to the door and opened it. She stared at Greg as if he had just landed from Mars. Can I help you? She asked. I'm Greg, baby, he said. Greg who, baby? She asked, looking at him strangely. What kind of name is Greg, baby? Mom, you're joking, right? She asked. I need to take you to the doctor. Come in, Greg, I said, looking past her. Who's this cute girl? Greg asked, not taking his eyes off Melissa since she had walked in. Greg Martin, meet my daughter, Melissa Conrad, I said. Greg held out his hand to Melissa. Don't bother, Fonzie, she said sharply. You're not staying here, Mom. Can we talk upstairs? She grabbed my arm and pulled me upstairs. You're not serious, she said. How old is he, 25? He's 29, I replied. What does he do? She asked. I didn't know, so I shrugged. Melissa, we can talk about this later, I said. When I get back from my date, we'll sit down and talk about everything. Mom, I'm not staying here, she said. I'm not staying in this house until you come to your senses or Dad decides to come back. Then she left, slamming the door behind her. I went downstairs, determined not to let her ruin my evening. Where are we going, Greg? I asked. Greg's car wouldn't start. He had to try twice on the way to my house, so I got behind the wheel. We ended up at a seedy club where he wanted to go. He danced with me once and with many other people, including a couple of times with 2 of his guy friends. He didn't introduce me to any of his friends. My dress was ruined when someone spilled beer on it. By the time we left, I had no money left. I drove us home. Greg came into the house and we had a nice rest of the evening. When I woke up early the next morning, I discovered that Greg was moving his things into my house. We're going to be so happy, baby, he murmured. I was a little upset that he hadn't asked my permission to move in, but then I thought about it and realized that all couples go through little arguments and disagreements like that. I told him about my parents' barbecue, and he said he wouldn't go. That's how our first fight started. I couldn't believe the day had gone so badly. Maybe it was because I was comparing him to Mel. That was unfair to both of them. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Mel showed up. I heard his car pull up and knew it was him. I ran down the stairs to avoid a confrontation. I saw them standing on the porch talking. Then Mel turned and walked away without letting me say a word. I ran down the road after him, calling his name, but he didn't even slow down. What did he want? I asked. He's a nice guy, Greg said. And he has a cool car. He just told me to treat you right and wished us happiness. He came in to get his things. He said he came now because he thought we were already at your parents' house. He said something about us having to move out soon. What? I asked. What are you talking about? Why are you yelling at me? He asked. He left, and when I went inside, he was lying with his feet up on my white linen sofa, drinking beer. I just stared at him. I'll go with you to your parents' house if you let me throw a party, he said. He explained that he wanted to invite some of his friends over to introduce them to me and show them how happy we were. I was so happy that he suggested a barbecue at my parents' house that I immediately agreed. I also liked that we seemed to be willing to compromise and make decisions as equals. It was a big step forward in our relationship. I won't go into details, but my parents and most of my relatives and friends hated Greg. In the end, my father kicked him out of the house. Actually, my father just told him to get out. My brother-in-law grabbed him by the collar and pushed him out the door. I told my father he was wrong to kick Greg out. He replied that I could go with him. I told him he was making a mountain out of a molehill. Greg had just farted loudly a few times and told a couple of stupid jokes. He was just trying to be friendly in an unfamiliar situation with a group of people he didn't know. Maybe he was a little loud and not entirely politically correct, but I was going to spend the rest of my life with him, so they would have to adjust. When we got home, I noticed that even more of Mel's things were gone. He left me a card with his lawyer's name and number so I could pass the information on to my lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer yet. On Saturday night, Greg and I stayed home. He invited a few friends over, and they sat around playing video games on the console he had hooked up to my TV. I was alone most of the night until they left. Then Greg and I made love, and he fell asleep. On Monday, I woke up and asked Greg if he needed to go to work or anywhere else. I wanted to clean the house. It hadn't been that messy since Melissa was a teenager and threw parties. That's when I found out that Greg had taken a leave of absence, or in other words, lost his job. The doorbell rang and Greg opened the door. "You're next, baby," he shouted. I stumbled down the stairs, still trying to figure out how my new relationship was going to work out. I noticed that Greg was staring intently at the man standing at the door. When I approached the door, I saw a young woman sitting there. She was about 20 years old and quite pretty. A thin briefcase lay at her feet, and she was holding a folder with documents in her hands. She was chewing gum and looked bored. It looked like she was selling magazine subscriptions or something like that to pay for her studies. When I approached her, she looked up at me and asked my name. I was sure she had found my name on one of those lists on the internet. Companies that compile these lists buy and sell addresses and names so they can sell you products that, based on your history, they think you might be interested in. "Melinda Conrad?" she asked in a bored voice. "Yes," I replied, "but I'm not." "You've been served with a subpoena," she said. She handed me a stack of papers and without letting me ask a single question turned and walked away. She was still chewing gum and looking for another folder in her briefcase. Glancing at her watch, she got into her car and drove away. I looked at the documents she had given me. I guess I expected Mel to just sit and wait for me to decide how we were going to get divorced. Obviously, he didn't think so. The card with his lawyer's contact information that he had left the day before was still on top of the pile. He was insisting on a divorce, and I was beginning to wonder if I even wanted him anymore. Attached to the divorce papers was a note stating that Mel was selling my house as part of the property settlement. I had 30 days to find a new place to live or make other arrangements. The document also stated that I could buy our house from Mel if I wanted to. Mel filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. There would be no child support payments, as Melissa was already 18 years old. He intended to continue supporting her, but the papers stated that her agreement would be separate from mine and that I would have to discuss the details with her. I knew there would be no problem. Mel loved his daughter. Perhaps she would be better off than me. He offered me a small amount for child support for 6 months and 40% of our savings and account balances. He excluded me from his retirement plan. If I did not agree to this settlement, he would file a claim of infidelity, which I had already admitted to. It was too much information for me to process. Since I initiated the divorce, he would not pay for my lawyer's fees. This meant that the lawyer's fees would eat up all the money I would receive. In addition, under the circumstances, Mel was generous to me regarding the house. He could have just kicked me out onto the street. When we bought the house, my name was not on the mortgage because I did not want it to be there. We were not sure we could pay the mortgage, and if we lost the house or had to file for bankruptcy, it would be helpful for one of us to have a good credit history. Since the house was in Mel's name, he could have just kicked me out, especially since I had cheated on him and brought Greg to live in that house. When those thoughts ran through my head, I realized I was in trouble. For over 20 years, Mel had controlled our entire lives. He paid all the bills, took out the mortgage, bought the cars, and did everything else. I wasn't sure I knew how to find a new place to live, let alone how to pay for it. Mel was a gentleman and didn't drain our bank accounts. He only took 50% of our accounts and savings. That meant that none of the money in the accounts was mine. If I spent more than 40% of the previous total balance, I had to pay the money back. The bigger problem was the house. Our house was worth about $200,000. That meant that if the house was sold for that amount, I would get $80,000. But if I wanted to live there, I would have to pay Mel $120,000. I wasn't sure I could get a mortgage or loan for that amount, especially since I had no job and no credit history. I also couldn't take out any loans against the property because, again, the house wasn't in my name, so I had no equity on paper. I needed to find the cheapest lawyer I could find, and as soon as possible. I needed to talk to Mel to see if there was any way out of this situation. Maybe I could just give him the house in exchange for letting me live there until I got back on my feet. That would give me a few months to figure out what to do about the divorce. Mel and I really needed to talk. The problem was, he just didn't want to talk to me. I decided I needed someone to stand up for me. I called my father and asked him to call Mel. He refused. "Melinda, you're my daughter. I'm very shocked and disappointed by this whole situation. This man has turned out to be a much better son-in-law than I expected. I need to call him as soon as possible. I need to apologize to him for our last phone conversation. He called me a couple of days ago to arrange a meeting with you and your mother on our anniversary. I finally asked him why he couldn't come to the barbecue. He didn't come because he didn't want any arguments or distractions on our anniversary. I couldn't believe what he said you did to him. I could hear my mother's voice in the background. And then you showed up with that bully and ruined our celebration. To be honest, I wish Mel had come to the barbecue instead of you. So if you're trying to convince me to introduce you to him, forget it. He suffered enough. Let him live. You wanted a divorce? He's giving it to you. Although if it were me, if I were married to you and you tried something like that, I'd kick your ass. After that, my father hung up. I decided to call my daughter and ask her for help. After all, she wanted us to be together again. Melissa turned out to be even less helpful than our grandparents. She didn't want to talk to me. I called her cell phone several times, but it went straight to voicemail. When I called for the third time, she changed her greeting to one she had made up especially for me. Hello, this is Melissa. I can't answer your call right now. Please leave a message after the tone. Unless you are my ex-mother, in which case you should not call or leave a message because I don't want to talk to you. Goodbye. Selfishness has its price. And although I didn't realize it, I was just beginning to pay it. Ann Wilson handled the divorce. She was a wonderful woman. Despite her initial attitude toward me during our first meeting, I noticed that she cared deeply and was concerned about my well-being. She called me every day to tell me what was happening and what to expect as a result. She let me know right after Melinda received the court summons. She also asked me what I wanted to do in each specific situation. Some of her suggestions seemed wrong to me. She suggested that I take an extended leave of absence from work. That way I would have no income. But I could live without paying Melinda child support. I loved my job, but the thought of being tied to Melinda for any length of time was unbearable to me. There were a few ideas that I often regretted not having time for. There were also a few places I wanted to see or visit. Maybe the idea of taking time off work wasn't as bad as I thought. Dad, this place is perfect. It's huge, like a damn house. It has 3 bedrooms and I love the pool. And the gym will help you avoid going to the gym. I think you should take it, said my daughter Melissa. I took Lissa to the apartment I was planning to rent. I had already decided that I liked it. The monthly rent was high, but there were options to rent for 6 months or a year. At the time, renting for 6 months while I looked for a house seemed like the perfect option. Melissa had been wonderful the last few days. She was living with her grandparents to be closer to me and commuting to school every day. I don't know how I would have managed without her support. Joyce was wonderful too. She took care of me, and even though it was still too early, she had already started trying to set me up with someone else. Just because you found one apple with a worm in it doesn't mean you have to give up on apples, she said. It'll only take me 15 to 20 minutes to find someone who will make you happy. Over the last week, I had stopped suffering so much. I was no longer angry with Melinda and, to some extent, understood her position. If she really wasn't happy with me, she deserved to be with someone who could make her happy. The only thing that bothered me was how she had done it and how unceremoniously she had told me. After all the years we had spent together, I deserved better. Maybe I would have respected her more if she had come to me and told me she was unhappy. Maybe she would have given me a chance to change our lives to make her happy. I would have done anything for her. But she decided to find a boyfriend and then tell me she wanted a divorce. And now she seems to want to talk about everything and try to stay friends. Screw her. I can find friends on my own. I called the property manager and told him I'd take the apartment. It's ready to move in, so I'll write him a check in the morning and want to move over the weekend. As I kissed Lisa goodbye before she left for her grandparents' house, I realized that everything was going to be okay. I remembered how my parents made me take piano lessons when I was 8. My piano teacher, Mrs. Lipcomb, taught me to rhyme so I could remember the notes. E, G, B, D, F. Every good boy does fine. I had spent my entire life trying to be a good boy. I was good at it. At first, when Mel hit me with all this, I couldn't see a way out. Only suffering and loneliness. But then I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I was in trouble and I knew it. Greg had emptied his savings account to buy himself a car. Over the past 2 weeks, I had begun to wonder why I was even with him. Not only did he drive into the house without asking permission, he started using the house as a hangout for all his friends. They would come over at all hours of the day and night, and many of his friends were women. Then he started picking on me, saying that we weren't in an equal relationship. We didn't share or divide things. He didn't understand why I could do that with Mel and he couldn't. So I gave him a key and, foolishly, access to my bank account. And within a week, he had completely emptied his savings account to buy a used Honda. I tried to explain to him that the divorce seemed to be moving forward. It looked like Mel would get his 60%. I agreed so that I wouldn't be labeled a cheating spouse and drag Greg into it. Mel also didn't want to give me any breaks on the house. We only had 2 weeks left, and the way things were going, we wouldn't have enough money to buy another house. I might have had to move into an apartment. Even worse was learning that Mel was planning to take a few months off work, maybe even a couple of years, until he got over the depression our breakup had plunged him into. That meant he wouldn't have any income, which meant I probably wouldn't be getting child support. He was even letting his daughter down. As I learned from my sister, Melissa was now living with my parents to support her father emotionally. She was supposed to move out of the house that weekend. He probably wasn't giving her enough money to stay in her dorm. Last night was the worst. After I tried to tidy up the house, which Greg and his friends seemed to have left in complete disarray, I went out onto the terrace to relax for a while. I think I must have dozed off. I woke up to someone tapping me on the shoulder. It was Greg, of course. He wanted to have some fun. "Greg," I shouted, pushing him away, "if you really loved me and wanted us to be together forever, you wouldn't mind," he said. "I guess next time you'll want me to move out." I didn't know if I was doing it because I really thought he was hurting or because ending the relationship would mean throwing away my marriage. "No, Greg," I said. "Well, why not?" "Don't be like that," he said. "I'm not in the mood," I exclaimed. "Good night." "I'm sure you'd be in the mood if I were Mel, wouldn't you?" he replied sharply. Then he left the room, slamming the door behind him. I don't know if I felt relieved or sad that he was gone, but I thought about his question and knew what the answer would be. By then I was beginning to realize that I had acted foolishly. The only problem was that I didn't have a backup plan. Greg had told me that he would start a new job in a few weeks and that everything would work out after that. He needed a car to get to work and had found a good deal. I got up about an hour after he left. I felt ashamed that we had argued, and I wanted to talk about it. Our relationship was spiraling out of control. In some ways, it was similar to what had happened with Mel. When I was married to Mel, I should have talked to him about my feelings. If I had, we might have stayed together. I vowed not to make the same mistake with Greg. Greg couldn't change unless I told him what I didn't like. We were from different generations and had different lifestyles. Conflict was inevitable. I went downstairs to the living room and heard some noise. One of Greg's damn friends is entertaining some woman in my house, I thought. When I walked into the room, I saw that I was right. Only it wasn't one of Greg's friends. It was Greg himself. "I know you're upset," he said. "But this is really your fault. You're the one who said no." I didn't say a word. I just turned around and went out onto the terrace. I sat down in one of the lounge chairs that I had seen online, and that Mel had worked so hard to build and paint to make me happy. As I sat there, I noticed that the other 3 chairs from the set had been thrown into the pool, and the chlorine was already starting to wash the paint off them. I just started crying and praying that I would wake up, and that it was all just a bad dream. I fell back asleep, sitting by the pool. When I woke up the next morning, I looked at the clock. I was freezing. I had slept outside, and Greg hadn't come to wake me up. On top of that, I was late for my meeting with the lawyers to sign the final divorce agreement. I walked to the house, but the door was closed. Not just closed, but locked. I started banging on the door, and after about 10 minutes, the girl Greg had been with last night let me in. She didn't say anything. She just opened the door and left. She was already climbing the stairs when I called out to her. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To bed," she yawned sleepily. "You're not sleeping in my room," I said. "Greg said I could," she muttered. "Get out of my house or I'll call the police," I shouted. "Go to hell, old woman," she snapped. "I've been kicked out of much better houses than this. I'll be glad when Greg leaves you. You suck all the joy out of everything." I quickly took a shower and changed into something more or less decent. I noticed that someone had been rummaging through my purse, and all my money was gone. I jumped in my car and drove to Mel's lawyer's office. The man who was representing me was there. I sat there for about half an hour listening to legal jargon and signed the papers where I was told to. "The divorce will be final in 90 days, Mel's lawyer said. "Wait," I asked. Where's my husband? You don't have a husband anymore, Mel's lawyer, a big angry woman, replied. But I still have 90 days to change my mind, right? I asked. I knew I didn't need 90 days. I didn't even need 90 minutes. I wanted Mel to come home and help me get these bastards out of our house. I thought I'd talk to Mel, I said. Maybe it's not too late to fix things. This may be my fault, my lawyer said. In 90% of cases like this, although it's not required, both parties are usually present in case something goes wrong. That doesn't mean he had to be there, it's just the way it's done. He's not coming, Mel's lawyer said. He signed the papers 3 days ago. He wants nothing to do with you. He's not even in town. He's on a cruise with his daughter. They call it a freedom cruise. I think you know why. I sat there looking at this woman. She seemed to be getting great pleasure from my suffering. What if I change my mind? I whined. I whined. They both looked at me and shook their heads. I could see that none of this mattered to them. To them, it was just another job. They started putting documents into folders and briefcases and paid little attention to me. I want to talk to Mel, I shouted. I want my husband back. I got the impression that none of them cared what I wanted. I was sure the woman was trying hard not to laugh. I grabbed her by the shoulders. She looked at my lawyer as if to ask if he had seen me grab her. I felt that if I didn't let her go, I would be beaten. So I quickly backed away and decided to try a different tactic. You're a woman, I said. Don't you feel sorry for me? I made a big mistake. Can't you help me? Why should I? She asked coldly. Besides, I can't help you. She put her briefcase back on the table and turned to me. I rarely handle divorce cases involving men, she began. I like to defend women who are being treated unfairly by their spouses. In your husband's case, I made an exception because when I first saw him, he was in such a state that he reminded me of the worst women I could imagine. He was simply in shock from what you had done to him. If I hadn't helped him come to his senses, he probably would have given you all his money in the house just to get rid of you. But, I began. Her face grew even more stern. But nothing, she replied sharply. Do you know how many women are abused by their husbands? They are cheated on, beaten, robbed, ignored. Most of these women would give their lives for a man like the one you just humiliated. You put that poor man through hell. Now he's finally free of you and starting a new life. But your boyfriend's things aren't going so well, and you've decided you want your husband back. Too bad, bitch. Life goes on. She turned, picked up her briefcase, and gestured for me to leave because she was leaving too. 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers, Melissa and I returned from our cruise, and I started tinkering in my workshop. I remember it in great detail. It was one of those moments you never forget. I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. I had the idea of connecting the servo controller directly to my own processor and sensor. I made 3 of these controllers to test them. The next day, I took one of them to one of our company's factories. Together with one of our equipment repair technicians, I connected it to a machine that wasn't working. Everything worked perfectly. My module allowed that machine to detect approaching objects around it and move to avoid them without any programming. I felt like I had stumbled upon something important. I had another friend who was into robotics. I gave him one of my modules. I went home, finished the remaining module, and a few days later filed my first patent application. I worked with a company that specializes in bringing inventions to market, and everything went very quickly. Literally hundreds of companies wanted to license my patent, and even more were interested in buying the finished modules. I had to hire a lawyer and an accountant. We set up 2 small companies. One was responsible for licensing my patent and everything else I'd invented. The other was responsible for manufacturing the modules. We outsourced production to a small local shop that was struggling to stay afloat. My plan was to eventually buy the shop and keep the owner on as manager. In less than 3 months, I had so much money that I didn't know what to do with it. Melissa and I moved into a house that was even bigger than the one we had lived in with her mother. I hired Joyce from my old company because I couldn't think of anyone else I would rather have as my assistant. Melissa also worked for me while she was in high school. She began to think about changing her major from liberal arts to business. Our relatives, with whom we were still on very good terms, were delighted with our success. They called and invited us over for Thanksgiving dinner. Bob said I shouldn't worry about Melinda being there. She hadn't been welcome in their home since she brought that man, as they called Greg, to their anniversary party. I accepted on behalf of myself and Melissa. After hanging up, I went out to the pool where my daughter and some of her friends were sunbathing. Mel, just out of curiosity, have you heard anything from your mother lately? I asked. She got up and walked me into the house, leaving her friends to sunbathe. Dad, she called so often that I had to change my number, Melissa said. I don't know what's wrong with her. You gave her so much money. Damn it, the money from the sale of the house should have been enough for 2 or 3 years of comfortable living while she looked for a job or went back to school. I don't know what happened to her common sense. Now she's living with Greg in a rundown apartment downtown. She's almost out of money. I've heard terrible things about him and his friends from people I know at school who know them too. I looked at her seriously. Dad, if you find out about this, it'll only hurt you. Let's just live our lives. Besides, don't you have a date tonight? I smiled at the thought. I was on my third date with a woman I had met on a cruise. Although we had gotten along great on the ship, it had taken me a long time to get close to her after we returned home. It was mostly my fault. I just couldn't think of a reason to call her. Finally, as soon as I got my license, she called me. It turned out that my nosy daughter was tired of me pottering around the apartment all day and had called her. Melanie Fitzgerald was a widow. Her husband had died in the line of duty 5 years before we met on the cruise. We were brought together by the fact that we had both lost someone we loved deeply. It was very important to both of us, and we gradually came out of our shells. By the time Melissa brought us back together, we both missed each other but didn't know how to reconnect. Our first date was traditional, dinner and a movie. On our second date, we danced at a club, and tonight we were going on a river cruise, dinner, and more dancing. I hoped everything would go as well as the first 2 dates. I especially liked dancing with her. The feelings I had when she pressed herself against me told me that everything would be fine. Melinda had knocked me down, but I got back up and kept going. I got into my Mustang and headed for Melanie's house. As soon as I started the engine, the radio came on, and it almost made my head spin. Melissa had driven my car to the store that morning and left one of her CDs in the player. She had been listening to Ozzy Osbourne's I Don't Want to Stop. I turned the volume down a little, then smiled and turned it up all the way. Anyway, it was a great song to drive to. As I pulled away from the curb, I noticed another car coming from the opposite direction, but I didn't pay any attention to it. I drove to Melanie's house listening to Ozzy scream that he wasn't going to stop. All my life I've been high. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I don't want to stop. Yeah, you and me, Ozzy, I thought to myself. Until that moment, I hadn't noticed that a car was following me, a bright Honda. The car looked like it belonged in a circus. Only a teenager who had watched Fast and Furious too many times would drive a car like that. The guy was probably following me, hoping I would pass him. When I pulled up to Melanie's house, I got out of the car. I turned off the radio because she lived in a nice neighborhood. Melanie was wearing a very pretty gray corduroy dress that fit her figure perfectly. She came out of the porch and literally ran up to me as soon as I got out of the car. She hugged me tightly and even kissed me. It was our first kiss. I'm so happy, she said. Come on, I replied. Well, we've been on bigger and probably much nicer boats together. It's not about the boat, honey, she said. It's because I'm with you. I missed you. I haven't seen you in 2 days, and after what happened on our last date, I'm still reeling. I think we need to rethink our policy of not seeing each other often during the week. Talking to you on the phone is great, but it's not enough. We both turned around when we heard a car door slam behind us. Melinda got out of the clown Honda and walked quickly toward us. Get your hands off him, she shouted. I quickly stepped between Melanie and Melinda. Melanie Fitzgerald, this is my ex-wife, Melinda Harris, I said. This is Melinda Conrad, Melinda replied sharply. Can I talk to you, Mel? She asked. We have nothing to talk about, I said. I fulfilled all the terms of our divorce agreement. You didn't receive alimony last week because it ended 2 months ago. I was kind enough to give you another check last month, but now it's over. We have no connection anymore, so if you don't leave us alone… Mel, we'll always be connected. We have a daughter together, she said. Melissa is a grown woman, I said. Your relationship with her is none of my business. I can't and won't try to influence her in any way. But Mel, what if I make a mistake? She asked. Then you'll pick up the pieces and move on with your life, just like I had to, I replied. I made a mistake. I chose the wrong woman to fall in love with, and 20 years later it came back to hurt me. For a while, I didn't think I could survive it, but now my life is beautiful again. You can have your life back too. Mel, we need to talk. I have a lot to tell you, she said. And I don't like that you're seeing someone else while we're sorting things out. I didn't like you fooling around with someone else while we were married, but it didn't seem to bother you. So what I'm doing now that we're divorced is none of your business, Melinda. We have nothing to talk about. I opened the door and helped Melanie get in. Then I got in the car and drove away, leaving Melinda standing there. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at my desk thinking about an important question. I wasn't sure if I was rushing things with Melanie. We were good, but I wanted more. The door opened and she walked in. Seeing her enter the office and head toward me with a big, beautiful smile, I quickly hid the documents I had been looking at under the desk. That was one of my problems. Melanie made me feel special every time I saw her. When she saw me, she just went about her business. With Melinda, it was different. Everything I did for Melinda, she took for granted. She never thanked me for anything. Perhaps that was the main reason for our breakup. Let me see what has you so interested. Whatever it is, I'll try it for you. Melanie knew how to melt my heart, so when she leaned over and pulled out the papers I was trying to hide, I just let her take them. She looked at them and realized what I had been looking at. I thought her smile had always been bright, but now it seemed even brighter. Mel, are you looking at these for me? For us? She asked. I nodded. Do you really want me? She asked. I nodded again. She started crying and threw herself at me. My office chair broke and fell over and we both fell to the floor. Joyce rushed into the office and found us on the floor, embracing each other. I didn't want to interrupt, but you have to see this, Joyce smiled. She led us through the reception area into the conference room. In the hallway, we saw about 20 people who had applied for jobs with us. Some were office workers or secretaries. Others were applying for jobs in the factory where my sensor modules were manufactured. Look, Joyce said. She pointed to Greg. Human Resources flagged him because he claims to be your friend. Well, in a way, he is, I laughed. If it weren't for him, I'd still be married to Melinda. Should we hire him? She asked. Of course not, I replied. Come on, Mel, let's go buy a ring. Everything was resolved shortly after I introduced my wife to this woman. I could barely stand when I saw them together. He was still the same shy, caring man I had fallen in love with, the one I had taken for granted. But he seemed to be glowing. He was truly happy. I could tell by the loud music he had playing in his damn Mustang. Her body language was threatening. She couldn't wait for him to come to her door. How could she be so stupid? Doesn't she know you can't let a guy know you want him? You lose your advantage. As soon as his car touched the ground, she ran out of the house and threw herself at him. I knew what she was going to do as soon as she got the chance. I walked over to them, determined to pull them apart. I had to get him away from that woman before it was too late. That morning, I made a decision to get him back. I also had to get rid of Greg. What did I ever see in him? I guess I was a stupid, lonely woman who thought she deserved better and thought her life was at a dead end. I threw away the best part of my life. After I first caught Greg with another woman, I let him convince me that it was my fault for denying him sex. That just opened the floodgates. Now Greg was bringing women home at least a couple of times a week. He told me we were in an open relationship. He reminded me that when we first met, I was still sleeping with Mel. He didn't seem to care that I was married to Mel. Greg's entertainment became routine. Want to have some fun with her? He asked. Without waiting for an answer, I got up and got dressed. I left the apartment and drove to my parents' house. It took me a while, but I convinced them to let me in. I told them the whole story and they let me stay the night. While I was there, I noticed some new paintings on the mantelpiece. They were painted for Thanksgiving, my mother said when I looked at them. One of the paintings struck me deeply. It depicted everyone who had been at my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner. In the center of the group was a subgroup of friends and relatives. Between my parents stood Mel and that woman. Between them was my daughter Melissa. They were both hugging Melissa, and the three of them were cheek to cheek, Mel, and Mel together again. Everyone was smiling and clearly having a good time. It was just like the photo we took of the three of us when the whole family was together. My husband and daughter seemed to have replaced me without hesitation. Even my own parents preferred them to my company. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I looked at the picture. Everything in me said, throw that damn picture against the wall or into the fire. It took more strength than I could ever have imagined to simply put the photo back on the mantelpiece. I tried very hard to put it in the same place, if not the exact same place. What did you expect? My dad asked from behind me. Did you think they would wait for you forever? Dad, you didn't even invite me to Thanksgiving, but you invited her, I cried. Honey, your boyfriend ruined our anniversary. You made it clear that you wanted to be with him, despite what everyone told you. You even gave up your child to be with him. With that, I can't call him a man because, no matter how old he is, he acts like a spoiled child. And you act just like him. My father sat down on the couch. My granddaughter told you she wouldn't come back to your house until you got rid of him. That was your own daughter. You let her walk out of this house. That made it clear to everyone that he's more important to you than she is, and even more important than we are. Melvin tried to stay away from you. He let you have what you wanted. You can't blame him for trying to find someone who will make him happy. As for Thanksgiving, we told you on your anniversary that you couldn't bring that bastard you're living with into our house. And you're still with him. We invited Mel to Thanksgiving because, regardless of whether he's married to you or not, he's part of our family. He may no longer be your husband, but he's still our son-in-law because he's the father of my granddaughter. And the woman he brought with him? He asked our permission first, unlike you, who just showed up with your second jerk. Melanie is a wonderful woman. I like her very much. And if Melvin couldn't get in touch with you, she's exactly who I want to see with him and my granddaughter. She's polite, gracious, and kind. She's always welcome in this house. She's not like you, Melinda. She's not my daughter. But Melvin has a right to be happy too, so we should be glad he found her. But Dad, I want him back, I cried. He just shook his head. Melinda, judging by how well they get along and what they talk about, it may be too late for that. Even if Melvin doesn't marry her, he still won't want to come back to you. You hurt him deeply. Why would he put himself in that position again? Listening to them talk, I realized that Melissa was the one who pushed them together. Maybe she wasn't just looking for someone for Melvin. She was probably looking for someone to replace you in her life. Life is too short to be unhappy all the time. You had a wonderful life. You had a wonderful family. You didn't appreciate what you had, and then someone else came along and took what you threw away. After listening to him, I realized he was right. The next day, I returned to my small apartment and began cleaning. When Greg woke up, I told him that it was time for him and all his friends to leave. While cleaning, I found several overdue bills and an eviction notice. I didn't know they had arrived. I gave Greg access to my bank account so he could pay the bills. He didn't pay any of them, and all the money was gone. Last week, he tried to get a job, but he was turned down. He told me that the company he wanted to work for belongs to Melvin. In a year, my husband had become more successful than I could have imagined, but unfortunately, he didn't want anything to do with me. Yesterday, I went to fill out a job application myself. I sat in a large room and filled out the form along with many other people. When they started calling out names, I felt that I had a good chance. Many of those who were sitting next to me and had no skills came back with smiles and said they got the job. While I was waiting for my name to be called, I felt someone looking at me. I turned to my left and looked out the large glass window. There in the hallway at the entrance to the room stood my daughter. She was pointing at me and talking to another woman. The woman nodded several times and entered the room where I was sitting. She turned to the interviewers and they flipped through their papers. The man at the table immediately called me. My number wasn't there and I was called by name. I entered the interview room and sat down at the table. There were 3 people sitting at the table. 2 of them were women. I felt even better. I was sure that my daughter had passed the interview before me. And who knows what might happen if we all worked together. Maybe I would get my family back after all. You have no work experience, said one of the women at the table. She didn't ask me a single question, but simply read what was written on my resume. In a sense, I do, I replied. I've been married for over 20 years to the man you all work for. Mr. Conrad doesn't believe in domestic bliss, said the man. Both women shook their heads. You have no skills, said another woman. It says here that you have a college degree. Where did you graduate and what did you major in? Melvin and I met in college, I replied. I graduated from the same college as him, but not with the same degree. I remember that. Melvin probably remembers too. Thank you very much for coming this morning, the first woman repeated. She stood up and held out her hand to shake mine. Did I get the job? I asked. When do I start? What will I be doing? Will I be working with my husband and daughter? We still have a lot of interviews to conduct before we make a final decision on any position, said the man. In any case, we will be in touch. He stood up and also extended his hand to me. I got the impression that everything they said was complete nonsense. What they really meant was, Don't call us, we'll call you. As I left the room, I realized that I was the first person they hadn't hired. I turned around and saw Melissa talking to the people who had just interviewed me. She nodded and, without even looking at me, walked down the hall in the other direction. My own daughter had just ruined my chances at a job. I had only one option. I needed to find a place to live and money for food. I was too ashamed to go back to my parents. I had to apply for government assistance. After all the years Mel and I had paid taxes, they still owed me. Melinda Conrad, I blurted out when I heard my name. I walked into the office and the woman was looking over the forms I had filled out. How much will I get? I asked. Mrs. Conrad, what was your income last year? Have you received any cash or payments in the last 12 months? Your finances aren't very clear. What property do you own? Do you have any children you're responsible for? It says here that you were recently divorced. Have you received any alimony or cash payments in connection with that? Well, I received alimony for 6 months and $80,000 from the sale of the house, plus 40% of our checking and savings accounts, I replied. The woman looked at me. Are you kidding? She asked. No, I replied. You spent over $80,000 in less than a year and you expect... Get out of my office. My daughter Melinda walked into the office just as I was about to go in to see Melanie on her last day of work. Melanie wanted to work until the end of the month, so as not to leave her boss without a job, but we both decided there was no point in her working. If she just wanted something to do to take her mind off things, there was plenty to do here. Besides, Melanie is only 36 and I'm 41. Maybe we can give Melissa a little brother or sister. Hi, honey, I said, picking up my jacket. Are you going to Melanie's going away party? Yes, Dad, I wouldn't miss it for the world, she replied. I just wanted to show you this. She handed me a document stamped rejected. That's not true, I laughed. It is, she laughed back. I just kissed her on the cheek, shook my head, and headed to my new wife's party. I was enjoying life again. Everything was as it should be. I no longer felt anger or resentment toward my ex-wife, but my daughter probably still feels those things. Rejection is hard to come to terms with. To be honest, I would love to hire Melinda and have her work alongside us so she could see us regularly and understand what she did. They say the best revenge is a life well lived. I would like Melinda to see how we live. It would be like rubbing it in her face every time she looked at us. I wasn't going to take revenge on Melinda or do anything against her. I just let karma deal with her. I focused on being a good guy and making myself happy. As I walked out the door, I paused for a second trying to find my car. In the executive parking lot next to the building, there were two nearly identical Mustangs. It took me a second to figure out which one was mine. It was even worse at home because Melanie now drove the same car. I knew right away which one was mine. Actually, it was easy to tell. It was my car with the license plate EGBDF. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.